So we've got some images to work with. Let's go over to Photoshop. So when you open Photoshop, if you've never opened it before, you're going to see something like this, where it shows you, some tutorials and stuff like that. I'm just going to X out of here. I already know how to use Photoshop, but if you want to learn more, you could, click on Next, and it'll kind of show you some stuff. But I'm just going to X out of here. So this is what I'll see when I first open it. If I just open the program itself, not a specific file. And what I can do is I can either open a file, so I can go to Open, and then I put a bunch of files in my Downloads folder, so I can go and open a file here. Or I can create a blank file. So I can click on New File, and it's going to give me some different options. So it has some like basic types of files. So let's say I'm working for the web. It'll say, here are some different formats that you might want to use for the web. And then I can look at the other presets, and you can see there's like Web Common, Web Small, MacBook Pro, if you have a larger Retina screen, Mac Pro 15, iMac 27. I think that's actually what we have, although because I'm using the projector, it looks like I have a computer from like 2005 or something. HD desktop, so there's some different things here. There's also mobile, so that's going to be like portrait if you're working on something for an app or a website that'll mostly be on your phone. There's also stuff for like photo. If I'm printing like a really, really nice photo, I might want to use something like this. Or there's print, so like letter size, legal size. So there's a bunch of different options. We're going to be making stuff for the web, so I'm going to choose web. And let's see, I want something not tiny, so I might go with web large. And we can also change the pixel sizes here if we want to. So we can look at the dimensions in pixels. That's like, as we talked about, pixels on the screen. You can also do inches, which is based on the resolution. We don't really think about that much these days because we're not probably ever going to print these things, so we don't really care about the actual physical dimensions. Points and picas are for like if you're laying out a book or something like that. So we'll just stick with pixels for now. And so 1920 by 1080 is like the default video format now. Like if you're watching a YouTube video, like probably 99% of them are 1920 by 1080. I actually want something a little bit different. I don't see exactly what I want on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose web minimum, but then I'm going to multiply both of those things by 2. So I'm going to go to 2048, and I thought that it would calculate this for me, but it didn't. So I'll just scale it up after I open it. So then there's an option for artboards. I'm going to turn this off because I don't really want to deal with different artboards. That's a little bit more advanced. We probably won't really get into it this semester, so I'm just going to ignore it for now. There's a few other options here, like the color mode. I'm going to stick with RGB. 8-bit is fine. If you're doing something much more high detail, I might add more detail, a higher bit rate here, but I don't need to. We can change the background color. I think white is fine. It doesn't really matter that much. There's a couple other options that we don't really need to worry about too much. Okay, so then when I click create, now I'm gonna have a new document. Okay, so we'll go over the interface. The first thing that I actually want to do is save the file so that I know where it is and I can go back and edit it later. So that's the first thing we're gonna do, and then I'll talk a little bit about the interface. So once I have my file open, I want to go to File and Save As. The other way I can do this is hitting Command S. Or no, Command Shift S. Yeah. So if this is the first time you saved a file, it's going to ask you, do you want to save it on the cloud or do you want to save it on your computer? I'm going to save it on my computer. I think that's easier. And if you don't want to see this again, you can click this and it won't ask you. It'll just take whatever you put here. So I'll leave that off for now, and I'll say save on my computer. And so now I have one of these dialogues again, and now I have to figure out where am I going to actually put this on my computer. So It's taking me to documents, which is kind of like on the Mac, like the default, like we assume that you want to put your documents here. That's not normally where I actually put my documents. So what I'm going to do is click this little arrow. Okay, and then I'm actually just going to put stuff on my desktop. It's a lot easier to find it there, and it's easier to see everything. But I don't want everything just kind of floating around on the desktop. If I only have a few files, it doesn't really matter. But once I start to have a lot of files on my computer, it's going to be super annoying to find stuff. So I really like having stuff organized. So what I'm going to do before I save is click New Folder. And I'm going to make a new folder just for the class. I'm going to call this MMP 100. And then in there, I'm even going to make another new folder just for this project. So I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call this self-portrait. Let's just call it 1 in case I make more. And I'm going to click Create. So then I can choose a name for the Photoshop file. So I'll just call this self-portrait. I'm naming it like it's code, sorry. I'll call this self-portrait 1. And I think that's everything I need to do. So, and the format for this file is Photoshop. So this is something that we'll look at in a bunch of different contexts throughout the semester, but when we're creating media, we're gonna have our editing file, the file that we use to create the media, and then we're gonna have exported files, which are the files that we actually send to people. So the edit file has a lot of information, like different edits we're gonna make. But we don't want to send that if we're making, let's say we're just making like a really goofy meme. We don't want to send like 60 megabytes of this huge file to somebody through iMessage or whatever. We just want to export it and just the part that they need to see. So we're going to look at how to do that with different types of media. So for this one, we want to choose Photoshop File and click Save. And so now we've got our file ready to go. If we go back to the Finder and go to the desktop, now you can see why I like the 3 squares view in the Finder. If I have the regular view on, I can see all my files, and they're kind of like the icons are bigger or whatever, but I can't see what's inside of them. So now if I go to the 3 squares view, I can see MMP 100, self-portrait, self-portrait 1, and then I can put stuff in there, like I can put my credits in there. Okay, so I can just drag that over so everything is in the same folder. So file organization is super important when you're working with media because we're going to add tons and tons of different files in here. And if they get lost, if you forget where they are, you're just going to waste a lot of your own time not knowing where things are. And it's going to be annoying for you. So I'm going to really, make sure we have good file organization. So the other things I want to use here, I downloaded from the internet, so they're in my downloads folder. So I want to make sure that they go in here. I could just drag these onto Photoshop and they'll show up. But then if I delete them from my downloads folder or if I move my files, it's not going to know where it is anymore. So that's not a good way to do it. What I want to do is make sure everything's in the same place. So the easiest way to do that is to make 2 of these windows. So I have my downloads window. I'm going to hit Command N to open a new Finder window. I could also go to File and say New Finder window. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, and I'm going to go to my desktop. Here's MMP 100. Here's my self-portrait 1, and I'm just going to drag these guys in here. I get that nice little sound effect that tells me it worked, and now I have everything I need next to each other. So I have my source images, this bird and this lake thing, and my Photoshop file, which doesn't have anything in it yet, and my other cat image. And so now I know everything's nice and organized. I'm not going to lose anything, and I can start working on my project. And so this file is from when I downloaded Discord. I'm just going to delete that and then close this up. Okay. Any questions? Does this all make sense? Okay, so let's actually start editing some stuff. Unless there's other questions. Okay, cool. So what we want to do is take these images and make a little composite. And so we can drag them into Photoshop and then we can start to edit them. So I'm going to start with my background. And we can look at the information on this and we can see it's really, really big, right? The dimensions are way bigger than our actual canvas. So when we drag it in, there's going to either one of two things will happen. Either it's going to show us a smaller version of the image, or it's going to shrink the image to fit our canvas. So I already know that my canvas is too small. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So I can go to image and go to canvas size. And this was like the default that I used, but I want to make it a little bigger. So I'm just going to multiply these numbers by 2. So I know I can do 1024 in my head. Or yeah, that's 2048. I don't know what 768 times. What?
1536.
1536. Thank you. Okay. What I was gonna do, just so you guys know, is just say 7068 times 2, and it'll also just show me on the map. But thank you for doing that for me. Okay, so then I'll hit OK, and it just looks bigger. It's the same dimension. So if I zoom out a little bit, there we go. Actually, that's a good thing to mention. If you want to zoom in and out, you can hold Command and hit plus to zoom in, or minus to zoom out. And if you hit Command 0, it's going to fit the canvas to the window that you have. If you hit Command 1, it's going to go to 100%, so the actual dimension. So if I go to 0, it'll fit. If I minus, it'll get smaller. If I plus, it gets larger. There's also a zoom tool. So if I click on the zoom tool and hit plus, or if I hold the option key, it turns into a minus. But it also gives me some options up here. So it fit screen, fill screen. And then I can change the percentage. And there's some other options here, but I think that's good enough for now. Okay. So I'm gonna hit Command S to save that. One thing with Photoshop that I'll try to talk about, and you'll see, is that key commands are really important because it makes things work a lot faster. Instead of having to constantly go up to these menus, if I know certain key commands, like Command S is save, I'm gonna do that like constantly. So if I know some key commands, it makes my work a little bit easier. If you watch like a Photoshop Pro, they'll do like a million things in like 3 seconds. So I'll try not to go too fast because you guys have never done this before, most likely, but there are a lot of key commands. Okay, so I want to get my image on here. The easiest way to do it is just open up my Finder, get the image, and just drag it on here. And so you can see it's fitting the image to my canvas. Okay, so that's good, but we want the whole image. So I'm gonna drag this little blue guy, and I'm gonna drag this other blue guy. And then you can see the image is really, really large. So even if I go way beyond the size of the canvas, it still kind of looks okay because the image has a lot more data than the size of our canvas. So I'm gonna fit to the edges of the canvas. And Photoshop by default is going to kind of make these things snap. So you can see as I'm dragging, when I get close to the edge, it's going to grab it and pull it to the edge. Do you see that? So that's something that you can actually turn off if you want to, but it's good to have it on. So then I'm going to drag this down a little bit, somewhere around here. And once I have this where I want, I need to hit enter. I can't really do anything else with the program until I've confirmed that the image is where I want it to be. So when I hit enter, those blue lines are going to go away, and I've got the image in the background. So I still have my magnifying glass, so I'm going to click fit screen. And there we go. We have a nice little image that we can kind of composite some stuff over. Okay. Any questions? Okay.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So how do I? So let's say I already saved it, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't proportion it when I did save it. So now how would I fit it to my canvas?
Oh, so you already hit enter.
Yes.
And it was too small.
Yes.
Okay. So if that happens, so what you can do is you can open up the transform again. So when you change the size of an object, it's called a transformation. And the way I can do that is I go to Edit, and where is it? Maybe it's Image.
Is it Command T?
Oh yeah, there it is, Transform. Okay, so I can transform in these different ways, but I can do free transform, which is exactly what I was looking for. But I can also hit, as you mentioned, Command T. So when I hit that, it brings back that box, and now I can move it again. You can see the default is that it keeps the dimensions of the image. So when I move it, the width and the height stay the same ratio. But if I hold Shift, I can actually stretch it out if I want to. Okay. So the default, I'm going to hit Undo. The default is to obviously not do that. Okay. So I'm going to hit Enter again and save that. All right. So let's go over the interface a little bit so that we know how to do stuff. Any other questions before we do that? Okay. So the Photoshop interface is really, there's like a ton of stuff, and you can like move it around and do different stuff with it. It's probably better to just leave it the way it is for the most part. The one thing that you might want to change is just moving the layers up, although it won't let me. Yeah, so the main thing that we'll probably be using is this layers panel. And yours is probably bigger than mine. Mine's kind of small because of the resolution of my screen. But what we're looking at now is the sort of default workspace. If you go up to Window and look, there's a bunch of different options. So they have like suggested workspaces. So like if you're doing 3D, you can click and it'll bring up some different properties and different windows. If I go to, I want to do photography, it's going to bring up some stuff that's specific for photography. So there's a bunch of different stuff. We can also move stuff around. So I'm going to go back to the default. So for example, if I'm like, I really need layers, I can put layers in its complete own area. So if I just grab this, I can drag it around, and you can see it's pretty easy to do. You can see when it highlights something or if it highlights a little line. I can also move it over here if I want. Okay, so you might want to do different stuff with your layers and your different panels. For the most part, I'm just going to leave it in the defaults. One thing, if you've not used Photoshop before and you move stuff around and then you forgot how it got there, it can be kind of confusing. So usually I just stick with the essentials, at least for now. As you get to use it and you see what do I use more or less, then you'll have a better sense of what you want to have in your workspace. Okay, so the main thing we're going to use over here is the layers. We might look at some other stuff like the adjustments and the color, but for the most part we're going to use these layers down here. This guy here is the history. This shows you everything that you've done, and you can go back through your history and see different versions. And if you want to go back and do something else, you can use the history to do that. So that can be useful. I don't probably use it a ton, but it can be useful. So then on the left side, you have your toolbar. These are all the different tools. Like if I want to do some painting, it says I can't do that. You're going to see that a lot when you first start using Photoshop. What I need is a new layer. So actually, let's talk about the layer stuff for a second. So in Photoshop, everything is on these layers, and that's the way that it organizes the data, so we can like put stuff on top of each other. And your layer tools are all down here. So you're going to be using these a lot. We'll just use a couple today. The plus adds a layer, and the delete gets rid of a layer. And if we have time, we might get to this guy too. So the reason I got that error when I tried to use a paintbrush is this layer of my image is still a reference to the actual image. And so it won't let me paint on it because it'll destroy that image. I'll talk more about that in a second. But what I want to do if I need to paint is hit the plus button, and I can grab my paintbrush, and now I can do some painting. Okay, we're not really going to use Photoshop to do a lot of painting, but if you wanted to do that, you can. So another couple things with the layers panel. I'm actually going to drag mine up here because it's hard to see over there. And let's see if I can make this smaller. Okay. So we can turn on and off layers by clicking on that little eyeball. Okay. And then we can lock layers. The background is locked by default. And if I wanted to lock my image, now if I try to do a transform, so if I select this and I hit Command T, I get that little no, you can't do that sign. So that way, if you have something and you want it to stay that way, you don't want to accidentally move it, you can lock that layer and you won't be able to change it. And then I can delete a layer by just hitting the trash can. So if I want to get rid of that drawing, it says, do you really want to do this? And if I say, don't show again, it won't show me this again. So then I can add a layer back. If I right click on the layer, it also gives me a lot of options, including, oh yeah, delete's actually way up here. So I can delete the layer, I can do other stuff. So we'll do more with layers in a moment, but let's look at the toolbar. So these are not all of the tools, but it's the tools that Photoshop thinks you need. So I'm gonna do a little drawing again so we can see this. So the first tool is the move tool. And if I select my layer, oh, whoops. Okay, let's lock this guy. Okay, it's not letting me move my drawing. I guess because it's pixels, I don't know why it won't let me move that. Okay, if I hit transform, okay, then it'll let me move it. Okay, so I guess it depends on, oh, now I can move it. I don't know why that happened. Oh, now I still can't move it? What is? It's doing like a selection for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, so if I hit Command T, I can move it, obviously, but I should be able to move it just with the move tool. Okay, I can move it with the arrows. I don't know what the deal with that is. So let's look at our image, actually. Let's unlock this. So if I take the move tool, what? Wait, seriously? Okay. So if I have the layer selected and I have the move tool, I can move the layer around. Okay, I already had it nice and lined up, so I don't want to do that. I'm supposed to be able, what is, I literally have no idea what is going on right now. I'm selecting this layer and I'm moving it and it's switching. But it's not supposed to, so with Photoshop, it's not supposed to select things based on what you click on. Let me see if there's a setting for that. Selection. Okay, I don't know what that was about. There must be some setting. Okay, anyway, so now you can see I'm moving my little scribble. And if I lock this and unlock my background, I can move my background. So that's the move tool. It moves stuff. It's pretty simple. The selection tool is for selecting stuff. It's actually really, really confusing, and we'll spend a lot of time talking about it. But the basic idea is if I select a certain area, and then this isn't going to work, but oh, it did work. Okay, so then if I select an area, and then I move it, I'm only moving the part that's selected, but now it's not working again. There must be some like auto, like guess what's going on type of thing. Because it keeps, okay, whatever. Okay, so that's what selection does. We'll spend a lot of time with this. The lasso tool is also for selection, but I can like draw around and it makes a little selection. Oh, one thing that you're gonna wanna know, because it's really annoying, if you make a selection, like if I go like this and I don't want it to be there anymore, the way that you do that is you go to select and you deselect. Okay, or you hit Command D. There's no other way to do it. Like if I make a selection and then I change to a tool and I click somewhere else, that selection still stays there. The only way to get rid of that selection is to hit Command D. Okay, the crop tool, I can crop my image so I can make the image bigger. Okay, so actually I have this really big image, so maybe I should make it a little bit bigger. I can bring it in. I have to make sure I'm, hitting these like little white areas. But I can crop. This is actually changing the canvas size. Okay, this is another one where once I've done the cropping, I have to hit Enter, and it'll save that option. Frame tool, we're gonna skip. although it looks kind of cool. This eyedropper tool is to get a color. So if I want to grab one of these colors, I can just click on it and it'll change my color over here. So that's pretty useful. This one we're going to skip for now. This is the brush. I can draw stuff. I have to draw on a layer though. And you can see now it's drawing in the color that I just selected. And there's the other thing is at the top of this window, there's a bunch of different options depending on what tool you have selected. So if I have the brush selected, I have options to change the brush. Like I can make it bigger. You can't see it because it's a... Oop, let me switch back to black real quick. Oh, I switched tools by mistake. Go back to the brush. Okay. So we can make the brush bigger. We can also choose a lot of different types of brushes. Like I can get some like cool like charcoal thing. And now it changes the way it draws. Although I switched to the eraser somehow. I'm hitting too many buttons. Okay. There's also a whole bunch of different brushes. We're not going to go into this too much. There's different modes for blending and stuff like that. We'll talk about that later. There's a bunch of different options up here that we don't have to worry about right now. We'll do the stamp tool later. Eraser is what it sounds like. It just erases stuff. I can make it much bigger if I want to and erase a lot of stuff. The gradient tool makes a gradient. Okay, so it looks like that. It's kind of cool. Might be useful at some point. Let's see. We're going to ignore these. The type tool makes text. So it's really, really teeny, but I can make it larger. And you can see there's a bunch of text there. If we probably won't use that too much, but it's there. Then you have the path selection tool. We're gonna skip this because we're gonna talk about this more with Illustrator. And then I have some basic shapes. If you want to make a shape, you can do like a rectangle. Okay, if you want the rectangle to have a gradient, you can click on the fill and choose a gradient. We can choose a cool one like that, and we'll see that. Okay, we're not going to work with shapes a ton, but it is there if you want to add something. And then the hand tool lets me move my canvas around. So if I'm like zoomed way in and I'm like working on some details, I can use the hand tool to move stuff. But a nice thing is you can also get the hand tool just by holding space, and then you can move stuff around. We already talked about the zoom tool, but it does what it sounds like. It zooms in. If I hold Alt Option on the keyboard, it zooms out. And it also brings up my fit screen or fill screen options. There's some more tools down here. Oh, you can edit the toolbar. So you can take different tools in and out. You can see all the different tools that are available. We're not going to edit anything. And then there's the colors down here, but my screen is so low res that we can't really see it. But the color, you can see the colors here too, but I can also click on here to change the color if I want a different color. And I have to draw on something that's a layer. And this little button changes back to the default colors, and this switches between black and white, white and black. I can't remember what's below this, but you guys could probably see that. It might be useful. But yeah, that's the basic interface. Any questions on that? There's like a ridiculous amount of different things that you can do with Photoshop, so we're not going to go over all of them right now, but we'll introduce them as we need them. Okay, any questions? I'm going to delete these layers that I created. Everybody's good? Okay, cool. All right, so let's do some compositing just for a couple minutes, and then I'll take a break and let you guys work on stuff. So I'm going to leave my layers here because that's what I'm mostly going to be using, but I have a couple other images that I want to put into the scene. I have my little bird, and then I have this cat lady. And so with Photoshop, again, I can just drag this guy on here, and it'll show up. And I can resize it, do my transformations. It looks fine actually, depending on where I put it. Like if it's up here in the foreground, it looks normal. If I put it like back here, it would be like a monster-sized bird. But that's okay. So yeah, I'm gonna put it there. I'm just gonna hit enter. And so now I have this image, but I want to blend my images together, right? It's really obvious that these are two different images. And so one of the things I want to be able to do with Photoshop is actually blend these two images together. And so before we do that, I want to talk about the difference between what's called destructive and non-destructive editing. Okay, so let me write that down because those are so. Oh, I moved this file. This is a reason. This is a reason to know where your files are. Okay, I moved this file so it like doesn't know what's going on. So I have to go find it again. Okay. So destructive versus non-destructive editing. Okay. So this image right now, you can see it has this like little icon on it, and when I hit Command T to transform, if I make it bigger or smaller, it still has the same amount of data. Photoshop is just making it bigger or smaller. Okay, so that's non-destructive editing because Photoshop's not changing the original data from the image. Okay, but let's say I make this image really small, like it's really tiny, like this bird is going all the way back here. But then I go over here and I do something called rasterize. Rasterize is going to look at what is on the screen and it's just going to make those pixels. So that's destructive editing. I'm destroying the original data of the image. And you'll see that once I've done that, if I hit Command T and try to make it bigger, I just get these pixels. Okay, so the original data is gone. That's destructive editing. Generally, I want to avoid that because what if I did this and then 2 months later I came back and I was like, oh, I want to finish that image, but the image is gone. I can't get that back, right? Because I've destroyed that data. So what I want to do is not rasterize. I'm just hitting Command Z a lot to undo that. Let's see, I'm still there. Oh, I might need to hit Command Shift Z. Yeah. Okay, so Photoshop, one thing that's a little tricky that I'll mention real quick is if you hit Command Z once, it does undo, but if you do it again, it undoes the undo. So it doesn't keep going back. So if I want to keep going back, I have to hit Command Shift Z to keep going back through the steps that I did. And it also doesn't look like it goes back far enough. Okay, that's actually interesting. I'm going to delete this real quick and just check my settings. I'm going to go to Photoshop Preferences, History. No, let's see, Performance. Okay, so here it says History States is 50. I don't think that was, I did 50 transformations, but whatever, that's fine. Okay, I don't know what happened there. So let's bring the image back. I'm going to drag it in here. Okay, so what I want to do is non-destructive editing. So if I take this image, I can't like erase it, okay? Because it's not pixels. It's like a reference to another image. And so I would be like, oh, that's annoying. I need to erase these extra pixels. So what do I do? I'll rasterize this, and now I can actually erase the pixels. But I've destroyed the original data, like I just mentioned. Now if I decide to make it bigger, I'm not going to be able to. So there's a couple ways that I can deal with this. One, which is a little bit easier, is I can just duplicate this. So I can duplicate the image. So I just right-click and click Duplicate. And now I can rasterize this one. So I'll go to Rasterize. Now I can erase the pixels. And we still see the one behind it, so I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so now I can erase those pixels. And if I decide later that I didn't do it right, I can just go back to my original image. I can bring it back here. So that's one way to do it, but it's not super sophisticated. So what I want to do instead is use non-destructive editing. And so what I can do instead of like erasing the actual pixels is I can find out which pixels do I want to hide, and then I can use what's called a mask.